Greetings and welcome to Perfectly Planted. I'm Daphne Bascom, a physician, certified health coach, and the founder of Wingman Wellness.
And I'm Abena A, also known as Veggie Best. I am a plant-based health and wellness enthusiast, and Daphne and I actually started Perfectly Planted as a means of exploring many aspects of health and wellness as it relates to our physical, our nutrition, our mind, body, and social connection. And we are so excited you're here with us today.
Abena, you've got it exactly right. We started Perfectly Planted with all of you in mind. And our goal is to plant seeds of positivity, knowledge, and empowerment so that you can optimize the health of those you love and optimize your health.
And Daphne, today I am so excited to introduce a friend of ours who I actually have met and have known in high school. Shout out to Mount Hebron High. Go Vikes. It's safe to say that Dr. Abena Osei-Wusu wears many hats, right? Abena actually started her medical career in internal medicine and then went into specializing into cardiology and cardiovascular disease, and has studied at prestigious UPMC. Her passion and commitment today is towards serving and improving the health of global communities around the world, which is absolutely top of mind of her, and we're so excited for her to be here with us. Also, as if that isn't enough, she is a mother and a wife too. She has a very cute boy. She's a professional dancer and has this passion for culinary arts, which I absolutely love and have stolen some of the recipes she's posted on social media. And as if that isn't enough, also, she has a very amazing sense of fashion and has her own fashion line. So welcome, everyone, Dr. Abena Osei-Wusu.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Abena, I am amazed that our paths didn't cross at UPMC, but I'm actually glad they probably didn't because everything you've accomplished has put me to shame.
No, ma'am.
Can you tell me a little bit about your background and what led you down this you are definitely one of the most accomplished and just inspirational people I've met. What led you to who you are today?
Thank you so much. So first, let me say thank you for the opportunity to be on this podcast with you and Abena. It's really an honor to do so and to have this conversation. And thank you for your kind words of introduction. So how did I get here? I got here because of my parents, honestly, and where I come from. So I'm a Marylander by way of Ghana. So my family is Ghanaian. I was born there, raised in the U.S., and by very Ghanaian parents, very strong Ashanti parents who really imbued the culture within us. Really just a generation removed from abject poverty. And we were raised with the concept of to whom much is given, much is required. So my parents did not come from a lot, but when they were given opportunities, they made a lot out of them and then in turn reflected them back to others. I'm a creative at heart for sure, but also someone who is very cerebral and into science. And I often say if I maybe didn't have African parents, I might have ended up just being a creative. But because I have African parents, I'm a creative plus, in this case, I'm a physician. My father is a retired internist who actually also specialized in nuclear medicine. And I was that kid who went with him to the hospital and rounded from time to time, right? And, I would get to sit in the doctor's lounge and eat the donuts or whatever, and occasionally maybe look at some radiographs with him. So I did have an early exposure to medicine. I remember having an auntie who, even in the 80s, she was a psychiatrist. So she was, a Ghanaian woman who was a psychiatrist. It was completely normalized for me. And it's the importance of kind of seeing what you can be, basically. So in my immediate circle, I saw a lot of examples of what I could possibly be. And, I kind of came up with both. So Abena and I go back to high school days, and I think I was a creative even back then, even though I had a really strong academic focus and, always loved to read and learn. I still did the other stuff too. And as I got older, I really wanted to marry the passions between the science and humanity. So one of the lessons that I got from my dad, he taught me and really told me of his own story. Sometimes when you're growing up with a parent, you kind of forget that they're humans as well, right? But, I remember him telling me about his journey and how he evolved as a man through medicine and how it had such a positive impact on who he became. And that was really intriguing to me. And, as I've gone through the journey, I really understand that. But ultimately, what I found was that I really wanted to use the gifts that I have been given, whether that is, my academic gifts and, my creative gifts, to really help to uplift the health of people globally. And it's globally because, I have a global background, right? I'm Ghanaian, growing up in America, and I was always kind of told that, these are my roots, and that's really important. Interestingly, someone also told me that my middle name may mean global citizen, Afra. So that's really interesting. I didn't grow up knowing that. I just, knew I was named after my grandmother. But it's all about, how can I use what I've been blessed with? And I think I have been extremely blessed with what I've been given and the opportunities that have come. And how can I make the world better than I found it? So there's a lot of that. And yes, there's some enjoyment along the way. So I love to dance. I always have from childhood. I get that from my daddy as well. And, I followed that into African dance for many, many years throughout my career. I started sewing actually in high school with a pillow project in home ec. And as I got older, I became, I learned more and more. I'm essentially self-taught, but it also became more practical that I'm not a standard shape. I'm curvy. I'm a little bit tall. I got a high waist. I got long arms and long legs, and a lot of standard sizes don't fit me well. And I come from a culture where people also get clothes made frequently, right? And it's your size and everyone looks great. So that also sort of influenced me to create more things that everyone can look good in and feel good about themselves with wearing. And to kind of reflect the joy in my clothing and reflect who I am in my clothing. My clothing is kind of reflective of my background. It's, kind of westernized, but with a strong African influence. So I don't know if I answered the full question, but but that's a little bit about, how I got to where I am and I guess my background to a degree.
Well, I have to ask you a question because I'm sure everyone watching is probably wondering the same thing. Did you make the outfit that you have on today?
Yes, ma'am. I sure did. So this was a make, and this has a funny story. This was like a mood fabrics pattern that was free. And if anyone watches, Project Runway, Mood is famous for that show. And this is my first time like using an online pattern, and I was super excited about it. And I made it, and it looked horrendous. Like the sizing was so bad. I put it down for I think like 2 months, and then one day I just said, I'm going to come back to it, and I reworked it so that it actually fit me. I changed the sleeves so it represented me, as you can see the wax print there, and it became something that I loved. And maybe it's kind of emblematic of life in terms of, sometimes you're giving things and don't quite fit, but you make them work for you. And that was definitely a Tim Gunn make it work sort of moment.
And Abena, I just want to kind of connect a couple of things you said, and thank you for sharing that, because I think it's important. And one of the things that FSCAI and I we're both aligned with is how do we give back to our communities? But you're a physician, you're a creative, you have an African background. How does that tie in with your interest in culinary arts, how you espouse to your patients what a healthy nutrition may be? How do you weave your background with your medical training? Because I don't know about you, I really wasn't trained on nutrition as a physician, but we know that food really fuels us and food is medicine. But what does that mean to you?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. I always say that maybe in a former life, I might have been like a cultural anthropologist because I think I've learned a lot about different sorts of people, different types of people, different countries, ethnicities through food. And that has kind of been a journey for me from a very young age. And maybe because I have a background that starts with a story outside of the US, it always intrigued me to learn more about others. When I was growing up, honestly, before my younger siblings came along, My mom did not really cook Western food, so we ate traditional Ghanaian foods, which typically can be quite healthy. We have really, in many ways, it's a diet that's quite plant-based, and then, people may add to it, but it's a pretty healthy diet. But we certainly kind of had a hankering for what our friends were eating, etc. At a young age, I was looking at Yan Can Cook and Paul Prudhomme and all these folks, learning about different food ways and experiences, and also seeing the tie through, right? The red line that's through so many experiences. And what's interesting is that it did help me when I was seeing patients to kind of pull on this knowledge, right? Because if I have a patient and let's say they had a heart attack and I ended up stenting them, they come to see me in the office, we're going to talk about everything. Of course, you're going to get put on appropriate medicines, but we're also going to talk about how you can change your life so that hopefully you never have an event again. Mm-hmm. And you need the cultural competency to understand where the patient is coming from. So if I had a patient from El Salvador, perhaps we're going to talk about maybe not eating pupusas anymore, right? Like you're going to have to cut back on those guys. And my patients really got a kick out of that I understood their cultural foods, right? And the ones that may not be healthy for them, or how to make healthier iterations of them. For my patients of a similar background, which is West African, yes, we could talk about, maybe cutting back on your palm oil consumption, or this particular type of red meat that you might really enjoy, etc. But I really did bring that knowledge. And then my own personal experience as someone, who became plant-based and, vegan in 1997, right? I could bring my story of, how I learned to adjust and modify and still enjoy food, and really use it as part of the therapy, right? So it's not just kind of like an ends to a means that you're eating food to simply get calories in, you're doing it begrudgingly, but that you're doing it with enjoyment and gusto, with the knowledge that it's also hopefully improving your health as well. So my background, it definitely informed a lot. And also I think having a lot of exposure to different types of people, not just through the TV, but also real life as a youngster. I really, in retrospect, touched a lot of different parts of the world. In my personal relationships, my parents' relationships, I got to see a lot that way. And it really helped later on in life.
Abena, that's really interesting, and thank you for that. I think I wanted to go back. So you started plant-based in 1997. Talk to us a little bit about your journey and why. I mean, that was right into college, right? Right, yeah. In the second year of college, and you decided to turn plant-based. Talk to us a little bit about your journey.
So that's amazing. Now you got people trying to guess my age, but that's yes, it was college. And you know what's really interesting? So for me, my primary impetus for becoming plant-based back then, again, before the cool kids were into it, was primarily health. And this is how my story evolved. I was a very big carnivore. In fact, if I look back at it, I think that I ate way too much meat for a young woman. Like, I could not imagine a meal without meat, particularly red meat. And this was really just kind of how I had grown up to a degree, but I was on the extreme end of things. When I got to college, like many college students, I was eating a lot of ramen noodles. And that seasoning pack they have, you add the seasoning, and this is like our cheap college food. I was getting sick pretty much every time I ate ramen noodles, and nobody could figure it out. I had an extensive workup, and it turns out I was lactose intolerant. There's lactose in the seasoning packet, right? So I wasn't consuming a lot of dairy, but I was consuming that. And so that was the first time that I really had to examine the impact of, what I'm consuming on my health. And the first step was really to do kind of an elimination diet, which was removing dairy. And I think that's actually harder than not eating meat for an American diet, particularly an American college student. So that was kind of the first step. I stopped eating dairy, and red meat was kind of random. You hear like red meat's kind of not good. I wasn't much of a pork eater, but at the same time, I was in college, like you mentioned, and I was starting to dig more into the link between diets and health, right? And there is some extensive family history as well regarding cardiovascular disease, hypertension and stroke, particularly early onset in my family. And so then I really started thinking about my health and how I could possibly impact my health, at 19 years or so. And that's really how the journey began. And I thought actually that I would be a pescatarian because still I wasn't quite sold on not eating meats of any type, right? I could get rid of the red meat and the pork and even chicken and then was like, let's stay here. But I think, again, one, sustainability practices, access to, good sources, and then over time, increasing knowledge, I basically stopped eating fish. And frankly, your taste changed. When I got access to it, I didn't want to eat it. And then my knowledge also increased. So over time, so by summer of 97, I think had my last fish fillet at a Chinese restaurant. Actually, a research mentor at NYU made me eat some fish at a Chinese restaurant dinner that she took us to. But after that, I really started to think more about plants and a plant-based diet. And by the time I got to medical school, it had really become my way of life. I think everyone thought it was a fad, particularly based on my history. But by the time I got to medical school, I did have a little bit more knowledge. Now, interestingly, University of Maryland was starting to integrate nutrition into their teaching program for first and second year medical students. We even had teaching demos. They also had an integrative health focus to a degree. So they were doing some novel things in the late 90s, early 2000s that also kind of cemented, my path. And frankly, it became habit. Over time, I became much more aware of, sustainability issues, ethical treatment of animals, et cetera. But for sure, I started with a health focus and kind of, evolved to these other things.
So did you see any health benefits immediately once or even through time over the course of whether it's 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, that you've noticed that made you become such a strong advocate of a plant-based diet?
Yeah. So a young person like myself would not have been getting blood work done at that time, right? So I'll speak to that later. But I would say when I became plant-based, I definitely felt like an immediate change in my energy level. So I was a college student, maybe you're not sleeping as well, and there might be other habits that can be optimized. But when my diet changed, I immediately felt more energetic. I had more energy to go the distance, so to speak. I also felt like I didn't get the typical illnesses as frequently as the people who surrounded me. So all the URIs and cold viruses and things like that were floating around, I wasn't getting sick like everyone else. So that was that. When I started getting my blood work done, when I became of age and, you get your lipid panel and things like that drawn, I found that my lipids were amazing. My profile really was fantastic, really low LDL, good HDL cholesterol, and very low triglycerides. Now, some of that is genetic. I noted where my background is from, and I've done some research in Ghana, and I know that, our lipid profiles may be a little bit different at baseline than the typical, American profile. But when we were exposed to processed foods, our diet changes. Our lipid profiles also change accordingly. With age and with weight gain, yes, I've had some changes for sure, but those kind of things, in general, now people say I look younger than my stated age. I like to say that is related. I do think there's definitely some impact, again, some impact of genetics as well, but overall improvement in health. And I also think the, delaying of some of these things that are in my family history as well, the diabetes, the hypertension, et cetera, that, overall my health is significantly improved, as a woman in her 40s compared to, what I would have been, I think, if I had stayed on my previous track. So definitely were some immediate benefits. And then I can attest to what I think is, at this point was about 24 years of a plant-based diet that has had some long-term positive effects as well.
Now people are really adding up those years and getting right. Anyway, we've already revealed ourselves, and we're in the same graduating class, so it's all out there now.
it's you know what? I'm proud, and to be honest with you, I think that's the beautiful thing about growing older. I do feel like I'm at one of the best points in my life physically, and part of that is attributed to being on a plant-based diet. So I'm really proud of that. They can do the math, and I'm perfectly fine.
Yeah. In Abena, did you raise your children plant-based too?
So that is interesting. So I have, one son who's a toddler, and I married an omnivore. And let me say, he was less omnivore-ish when we were courting, right? He was during the courting side. But the long and short of it is no. And is it complicated? Yes and no. So my son is primarily plant-based. And I would say for a toddler, he has an amazing love of fruits, vegetables, and really, whole foods in general. He's the kid that will he wants to eat salad as a snack, or, he'll eat a lot of broccoli and cauliflower and a lot of things that when I see other children, I realize may not be usual. But he was born underweight and is, really thin for his size. So he's 98th percentile in height and like 49th or 50th or so. So he's on the thin side. And so I always thought a little bit about restricting his diet. As he has gotten older, I think the education and allowing him to make a choice will be important. But I think he's starting to understand mommy doesn't eat certain things, and he will question why. But at the end of the day, I do the primary cooking for the family most of the time. My husband's a great cook, but I do most of the cooking. And as a result, it's plant-based. And so I think he doesn't note that something is missing, for instance. But he is getting to the age where he's starting to see the difference. In a perfect world, I would maybe like to transition him more to the plant-based side of things. But there's also part of me that says, well, maybe allow him to kind of find his way. And then we also try to keep the marital peace. So that's part of it as well. But he's for sure, I would say maybe like 80% plus plant-based.
And I mean, you make great points, especially with your kiddos. They'll see things at school and at the house when they go to visit their friends. And if you instill in them your values, they will make decisions that hopefully will allow them to make wise health choices too.
Absolutely. Yep.
And Abena, you mentioned your father a lot. And I know my dad was so important in my life, and I always am blessed to think about the people that helped me along my journey get to where I am today. Can you share with us who, it may be one person, maybe two people, but who helped aspire and who helped you raise you up to instill in you and help you become this beautiful woman you are? And can you share a little bit about that part of your journey with us?
Absolutely. I mentioned my father because the linkage there is really obvious in that, he's a physician and I ended up becoming a physician. I definitely don't want to neglect my mother. So my parents have really similar backgrounds in terms of kind of coming from underprivileged settings and losing a parent very early in life, which, further compounds being in an under-resourced setting. My mom is really the first in her immediate family to go to college. And she went to school again when she came here with 4 children in tow. I remember being on campus with her while she was registering for classes and doing this and that, and she was carrying all 4 of us around with her. So I definitely saw things in my mother as well, even if the message is subconsciously still pursue what you want, still go after your goals, despite life continuing on. And in this case, marriage and having children, one after the other, that you don't necessarily stop dreaming or trying to reach it. So she really taught me a lot without having an overt sit down to say, this is what you need to do as a woman and as an African woman in particular. Coming to the US and doing that with 4 children was massive. That was a huge example for me to see. And so many things, beyond that, right? Of course, she also did all the other traditional roles that she was expected in a very traditional, kind of West African household in many ways. And so kind of reaching further for sure was instilled in me early. I would also say I had a lot of support. So FSCAI knew me in high school, and I had a supportive group of friends. So I'm going to shout out the collective that we had that really normalized academic excellence, sisterhood, having a great time, and self-confidence, right? I had a great nucleus of people that really helped to propel me forward. But in my home, I had parents that really said I could do anything. If any idea that I came up with, they're like, okay, sure. I was supported in doing that. I was never told, well, that's a little too ambitious. That's a little too much. I mentioned, my mom was in tow with 4 kids. There are actually 5 of us all together. All 5 of us are different. All 5 of us have different needs and wants and desires, but I felt like mine were nurtured. So it started in my home for sure, but it extended beyond that. When I think about this high school group that we're still very much in touch with, I think about how rare that actually is. I really kind of normalized it, but it's not typical that, that really existed. And then it continued in every stage in my life. I did not get here alone. At every stage in my life, when I went to college, it was the Meyerhoff Scholarship Program. I was in the 7th class of that program. And there again, I was in an environment where it was normalized that people that looked like me, so at that time, Black children who were like true geniuses, like Mensa type folks, okay? They were beyond my level, completely normalized that, yeah, these were cool kids, but they're also insanely smart, brilliant, have great ideas, and they can do rigorous research. They can go on and become MD PhDs or PhDs in the basic sciences, engineering, computer science. And that was what I was surrounding with. So when I got to medical school, again, I had another supportive group of people. Like, I've always had a way of attracting people who are of like mind and who really can be mutually supportive. And, we cheer each other on. When one person is down, others will come and rally and lift them up, and then vice versa. And it's followed me literally to this day, that even in my current position, I still have that. People that I can turn to when things get rough that can help to refocus me. And then I do the same for them. So immense community support from the beginning, basically, is the answer to the question.
Yeah. But Abena, I will say that I recall very vividly the core group of friends that you had. But I think that you attract what you want, right? And you are actually and I know you still are, a very strong leader and have that leadership qualities, and you've actually paved the way for so many as well, and have attracted this tribe that you're like, let's go, and I think that is definitely a great leadership quality of yours. But I do have to ask, with all your successes, there has to be a few character traits that you've kept consistent throughout your life. Mind sharing a few of those?
A few character traits you said that I've kept consistent. This is interesting. I might have to reflect, in real time a little bit. This is a double-edged sword for me, being self-critical, right? And it's not necessarily a negative critique. It means, I think, mostly checking in. And that check-in is, am I doing what is aligned with, my values, my core values, etc. Can I be doing this better? Right. I have no problem with saying, oh, I think I did that. Yeah, I did that. Yeah. So it's not negative. But like I said, it's a double-edged sword, because, for instance, when I was doing coronary interventions, there's no one that's going to be more critical than me when they look at a cath film, right? I'm going to find everything, even when the case went well, that could have gone better. So I think that evaluation and check-in, I've always kind of done that, right? Not in a way that I do have some OCD qualities for sure, right? But not in a way that can't tell. Not in a way that was detrimental. So being reflective in that way. Sometimes also, I am that extroverted introvert, and sometimes people find that hard to believe. But in a lot of settings, I may listen more than I actually speak. Depending on the setting, that may or may not be what other people desire. But for me, a lot of the times, it's a lot better for me to be listening and taking in than just filling up the space with my voice. I think I learn a lot that way. And it's not that I'm so pensive per se, but it just allows me to understand things a bit better before I opine or develop a plan. I'm a planner. I think that might be a Virgo trait. So I do like to try to gather as many data points as possible before I get into the plan. I don't know if that answers your question or.
No, I think you reflect on perfectionism, and I think that's that's something that's, a wonderful trait of yours, and you continue to lead and strive for that, which is amazing. So
thank you.
very strong.
So, Abena, it wouldn't be a perfectly planted conversation if we didn't talk a little bit about food.
Yes.
Can you tell us, one, is there a favorite recipe that you'd be willing to share with those who are listening? And two, what does a typical day in the life of eating at Abena's look like?
Man, so food is my jam, okay? Like I already told you. I'm a foodie. I love food, and that's why I have to live on this Peloton now, right? Because I figured the amount of calorie expenditure that's required to look kind of reasonable. Because I'm not going to stop eating. I'm not going to do low carb. I'm going to enjoy life. So my favorite recipes. Now, my favorite recipes are traditional Ghanaian food, I would say. And we don't really have recipes. We are intuitive cooks. I learned to cook when I was maybe 9 or 10 from my mom. And I think that day she actually did write things down so that I could follow them, but that was the only day she wrote things down, okay? Going from there, everything is kind of intuitive. I have been working on recording recipes because I understand there is demand and interest for people to learn more about West African cooking from countries like Ghana, Nigeria, Liberia, etc. But because of the nature of our cooking, sometimes that can be challenging. That said, my absolute favorite food, Ghanaian food, is abanquan. And what is abanquan? Abanquan is palm nut soup. This is not health food because of the fat content within palm, but I tend to reduce that when I cook. But it's the fruits of the palm tree. Palm oil folks, please don't come for me, because we West Africans have been eating palm fruits for millennia. And this is part of our traditional food. And this is, the antioxidant rich palm fruit pulp that is used to make a soup. And in my case, I really enjoy it with a rice ball. This is a pounded rice that is used to eat the soup with. I veganize it by using a variety of mushrooms. I might use 3 types or so. I love king oyster, traditional oyster, and maybe throw in some, like button or cremini or that type of mushroom, just to provide different textures depending on what's available. I throw in my okra, sometimes some baby spinach at the end, just to, brighten it up, because otherwise it can be a little bit monotone in color. But that is, do not disturb me. When I have my abanquan going on, don't call me, don't talk to me. Let me just focus on my food. But I will eventually develop a recipe for that can be shared. I've shared me making it on social media, but not the actual recipe points. A favorite recipe in the home, particularly because of my son, he really loves pasta. I have been trying to become more whole food plant-based because, like I said, I've been vegan for 24 years, but there's levels to this, right? There's vegan and there's vegan. You can be a junk food vegan for sure.
Exactly.
Or you can, be much more whole food plant-based. So this is a recipe that actually came from Isa Chandra Moskowitz's book. It's her most recent book, and I'm blanking on the title right now, but it's a lentil walnut bolognese sauce. And I love it because it packs the lentils, protein and fiber content. It brings in the fats, the good fats from walnuts in there. And I stopped buying jar sauces, many years ago. I typically make my own sauce, but there was a time where I was using more of the processed products to bring in protein, etc. But I love this because it's whole food, plant-based, and my kid eats it up. So that on top of whatever form of pasta is fantastic. He's also a big fan of my shepherd's pie, which is typically lentil and mushroom based. Sometimes I may add in a meat alternative, but the lentil and mushroom base for this shepherd's pie is really fantastic. And the day in the life, I'm not a big breakfast eater. If I do want to have something early in the day to break my fast, I do fasted exercise, and late morning, early afternoon, I might break my fast with some fruits, whatever is seasonal. And then I tend to have my heaviest meal during lunchtime. Today, that was some Ghanaian food. That was wachi. Wachi is a rice and beans dish. So rice and black eyed peas cooked together with some flavorings. The stalk of the millet plant actually gives the flavor, antioxidants, etc. for that dish. and with some plantain. Yeah, it was jamming.
Yum, yum.
Something lighter for dinner. And I love dessert. But I told you we could do this all day. We could have.
I was gonna say, keep it going. But I would love for you to share some of your recipes. I know that some of them aren't documented, but what are? We would love to post them after this broadcast, so some of our viewers can enjoy as well. So, also, Perfectly Planted, it wouldn't be an episode unless we plant seeds of positivity and gratefulness. And so we always like to reflect on what we're grateful for to just have that right mindset. So would love to understand and learn what you're most grateful for today.
Wow. So I will say that I don't look like what I've been through. My birthday is next week. And I would say 10 years ago, around this time, I was actually in the hospital. And I was hospitalized for a long period of time. And I went through a lot of things. I'm grateful for my health because, like I said earlier during our discussion, I feel like this is amongst one of the healthiest times in my life, even though I'm significantly older. I feel great. I feel fantastic. And that is a gift, to kind of come through some of the circumstances that I've come through health-wise and to land where I have landed today. I'm extremely grateful for that. I'm grateful for family. I'm blessed to have a son and to have a husband. I had my son late in life. That was not a guarantee. In fact, was told that it might be very challenging for me to do so. I'm grateful for my family. I was able to reconnect with my siblings, some of my siblings over the weekend, and some of my extended family. And I'm just grateful to have people, people who will say, that Abena, that's my person. I'm just grateful, to kind of have been brought through another year. We've had floods recently where some people did not make it through the flood, that my family made it. We might have structural damage, but we still have each other. So in general, I wake up every day being grateful for life and for my life, and then all the blessings that I have in this, happy life of mine, including my family and my loved ones.
Love that. Also, you mentioned a couple of things earlier on in the broadcast, and maybe there are some life lessons quotes that you like to reflect on during the more challenging times. Do you have any of those that you would like to share with us today? Specifically, any specific quotes? I think you may have referenced one early on.
So yeah, one of the first ones that I mentioned was, to whom much is given, much is required. Yeah. And that really has been something that has followed me in really every stage of life, whether it was high school, medical school. When I was a fellow training in Pittsburgh, Daphne, for instance, we noticed that there was a big need for cardiologists for underserved populations in Pittsburgh. And we set up a clinic to do that. And I was, co-leading that project. To whom much is given, much is required. I am very blessed. I realize that. I won't say that I live a charmed life, but I think my life is so much more than I ever could have imagined it would have been as a 17 or 8-year-old. And how do I pay that forward? How do I make this place better than what I found it, right? I want a legacy that touches people in a meaningful way, right? Not just billboards and accolades. How did I make lives better? How did I make places better? That's kind of, what guides me in terms of, how I move forward in life. Of course, hopefully moving with love and intention while doing so. And really trying to uplift people. Of course, we know that there are disadvantages, people that look like myself, whether they're here or in other parts of the African diaspora, we face a lot of challenges. And what can I do to also uplift people who are underserved, underappreciated, undertreated, when it comes to medicine, to help to improve their lives. Those have kind of been guiding principles that I've been able to apply in various settings, whether it's direct healthcare, whether it's leading drug development, that, hopefully I'm doing the right thing. And if I stay within those parameters, typically I don't get lost.
And Abena, I am grateful that FSCAI introduced us. Thank you so much for joining us today. It has been a pleasure getting to know you, and I'm sure everyone listening will feel the same way. If anyone if anyone would like to get in touch with you, are you on social media at all? Do you have a website? Or if they want to buy this beautiful outfit that you have on?
Yes, ma'am. I'm on the social medias begrudgingly. I got an Instagram account some time back, but you can find me on Instagram to kind of stay up to date with me and see some of what I'm cooking and occasionally some recipes. I'm at Doc Abena. That's Doc_Abena. I'm also on LinkedIn at Abena Osei-Wusu. So you can just kind of look me up there. Those are my main places. I do have an Etsy store. Right now, I'm not populated, but I'm hoping in 2022 to fully be able to launch my women's apparel, and hopefully we'll be able to have some things to come through. So please stay tuned and follow me at Doc Abena on Instagram to get some updates on that.
Wonderful.
That's awesome. And I know we have two physicians on the line, but please, all of our viewers, what we talked about should not be personalized medical advice. If you are needing to have any challenges, please seek your medical professional for more advice. And Abena, I am so thankful and grateful for you today for joining us. And so to our viewers, also, we want to hear from you. Please go ahead and comment and let us know what you think, what you want to see, and we'll continue to update our podcast. So Abena, I thank you again so much. We are so grateful for you, your beautiful smile, your beautiful set and clothing line, and all the information that you shared with us. We really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. This has been fantastic. I really enjoyed the conversation as well. And it's been a true pleasure to be in the conversation with the both of you.
Thanks, everyone. Be well, and we'll talk again soon. Take care.